Stranger Stories.
Never miss another strange story. Subscribe and hit the bell. Sit back and get comfortable. I have a few stories to share with you. Welcome and good night. With stories or sightings, if you will, of La Llorona, also known as the Wailing Woman, surfacing everywhere, I thought I'd share with you 4 scary La Llorona experiences that people actually have gone through. The best way to explain who La Llorona is, or who the stories say she is by revealing what she has done. La Llorona has drowned her 2 children in a river and is now looking for them endlessly. La Llorona's story is one of violence, and sightings of the spirit never end in a positive way. With that, let's get to the stories. The following story happened to both me and my ex-wife. It was during the summer when my family decided that we should take a trip down to Mexico to visit some family. I was about to join the Marine Corps, so my mother wanted me to go see my family in case something bad were to happen. At the time, I was with my pregnant girlfriend, who would later become my wife and then ex-wife. Since she was pregnant, I didn't want to leave her alone, so I brought her a ticket to come along as well. Her being Caucasian with blonde hair and hazel eyes made everyone around my grandma's house curious, and a lot of our extended family came by to see the beautiful American girl. After greeting everyone, we all started to talk about what had been going on since we had last left. My girlfriend was sitting next to me, having me translate parts of the conversation. One of my aunts, who knew I was into paranormal, brought up the subject of La Llorona, also known as the Wailing Woman. My mom quickly told my aunt to shut up, since she knew that it would get me both interested and scared. But I was able to push my aunt to keep going. I mean, I was going to be a Marine after all, and I couldn't let a silly myth scare me. She proceeded to tell us how whenever she would sleep over at my grandma's house, at which she was currently at, if she stayed up late enough, she would be able to hear her wails, the wails of La Llorona. My mom rolled her eyes and jokingly pushed my aunt. From there, the subject died as one of my aunts began talking about her son. Seeing at how serious everyone had gotten for a brief moment, my girlfriend nudged me and asked me what we were talking about. I told her about the myth of the Wailing Woman, about how she drowned her children in the river and was destined to walk along all rivers of Mexico looking for her dead children. She of course laughed, not really buying any of my paranormal stories. That night, my parents decided that my girlfriend and I should stay at our old house where I had grown, since we were both adults and needed our own space. The house was currently being worked on, so the bedroom had no doors or working lights. The only doors to the house were the ones led into the outside. They were fairly new, but they were your standard metal flimsy doors that a kick or a punch could make it rattle throughout the house. Inside, we had to use a candle or a flashlight for our light source. I remember we even used a bedsheet as temporary door to give the room a little bit more privacy, even though it was only us 2 in the house. As the night went on, my girlfriend and I stayed up, talking, and eventually we both fell asleep. I don't know at what time exactly, but something woke me up. I didn't have a cell phone, and my watch at the time was really cheap, so I wasn't able to tell what time it was. As I was debating on closing the window that was located right above our heads, I heard a long wail. It was a long, distorted wail. I could hear the old raspiness in her voice, like as if she had been yelling for such a long time, that her throat was ready to give up. But what confused me the most was that her wail sounded like it was being played through an old gramophone. I don't know if it was the scratchiness of her voice, but it sounded like an old, creepy record playing over and over again. She was wailing her trademark, "Ay, mi hijos," which means, "Oh, my children." The wail was what made her infamous, not just in the paranormal community, but with most people living in the rural parts of Mexico. My girlfriend started to stir and woke up. I don't remember if I woke her up on purpose, but either way, she was now awake and hearing the wailings as well. I was both excited and completely scared at the same time. A cold chill traveling down my spine reinforced my fear. The wails grew louder, making it seem as if she was slowly heading towards us. There is a myth that if you hear the wails close, she's actually far away, but if you hear them from far, she might be somewhere near you. My girlfriend asked me with half a smile, what the hell was that? Thinking perhaps I had one of my aunts come and scare us. I just motioned for her to be quiet and listen. Hearing my tone of voice, she realized something was wrong. Another loud wail passed by, echoing inside the house. My girlfriend started shaking, terrified of what could be outside of this house. I had my left arm under her head, and I could feel tears run down from her face to my arm. Each time the wail came, she would shake a little, and at the same time, I would hold her close. The wails eventually came to a peak when it sounded as if she was right outside of our window. Doing the only brave thing I knew, I pulled the covers over us and tried to remain as still as I could. The wails eventually faded out, and just as we thought that she was gone, we heard two wild dogs viciously fighting and slamming against our outside door. My girlfriend has grown attached to this stray dog that was used to walk around my grandma's farm, so while we were staying there, he could always sleep on the outside door to wait for us and greet us in the morning. The dogs, or at least what we thought were dogs, fought for a good minute, slamming against the door, snarling and barking at one another. Then, as sudden as the fight started, it stopped. We attempted to stay up for a while longer to see if we heard anything else, but eventually sleep took over us. The following morning we talked about what had happened. We walked outside to meet our stray dog, but he was gone. All that was left was stirred up dirt from a fight that had happened the night before. We never got to see the dog for the rest of the trip. He would usually come around, but we just told ourselves that maybe he had found a better place or owners that could feed him better. This all happened around 2008, and still on to today, whenever I pick up my daughter, I would talk and ask my ex about what had happened in Mexico. But she doesn't like talking about it. I have never been to Mexico since, and with all the recent La Llorona stories surfacing up, I thought this would be a great time to share my own. This stands out as one of the scariest and most bizarre experiences I've ever had. The most vivid and intense dream I ever had involved me walking through a forest by myself. It was daytime. Both sides of the path are covered in vines and greenery. I'm walking down this dirt path. The cascading tree leaves above letting a beam of light onto the forest floor. I'm walking down and looking at the sides of my path. All of a sudden, in my path, I come across a discarded beanie baby of a leopard. Silly, I know, but I take it into my hand. I keep walking. The beams of light coming in from above are extremely beautiful and vivid. I'm walking, beanie baby in hand, and then ahead of me I see two children, a boy and a girl. They're about 8 or 10 years old. They're dressed in all white. The boy's face is dirtied. He is the younger of the two. The slightly older sister trying to comfort him. As I approach, she looks into my eyes as if she's so relieved to see me. I just know I have to help these kids. "Are you lost?" I ask them. They don't reply. The boy rubs his tearful eyes. The girl looks up into mine. All of a sudden, I'm holding both the girl and the boy's hand on either side of me, and I'm walking down the narrow dirt path with them. The boy is holding the beanie baby now and is no longer crying. The girl is looking determinedly ahead. Everything is peaceful, and I'm feeling calm. All of a sudden, the path beneath us begins to widen into a clearing in the forest, a log in the center. We go to walk over it before I hear the loudest, creepiest, metallic shriek I've ever heard in my life. The children begin gripping at my hand harder. I can't make out the voice or what it's saying, but I know it's a woman. I quicken the pace and I try to get them to the path I see on the other side of the clearing. The boy trips over, but is still holding my hand. I turn to the girl and say, "Are you okay?" And she looks absolutely terrified, eyes now closed, completely shut. The boy trips over again. I turn around to help him up, and I feel horrifically panicked. And that's when I see her, right behind him. A dirty, unknowable woman-like thing. I can't say it's a human for sure. I couldn't see her face. 8 feet tall, she looked like a literal void of darkness. And the moment I locked my eyes with her, or with it, the scream started to reverberate now inside my head. I glance a final look at the girl and the boy, and the woman begins to rush towards me as she screams, "De la muerte," and then I awoke. Now here are the craziest things about this dream. De la muerte means of death in Spanish. I do not speak Spanish and have never spoken Spanish before, and at the time I was living in France. I wrote the dream down the moment I woke up, as it was the most vivid dream I've ever had in my entire life. The most interesting part, apart reading back, was the fact that the children did not speak or answer any of my questions. And now thinking about it again, perhaps it was because I spoke English to them. I wasn't sure what to think of the entire experience, so of course I googled it, and that's why I found out about La Llorona. I realized there are specific scenarios and specific things she would say in order to identify her as herself. These all perfectly match the description of my dream, and I am now convinced it was her. I have never heard of La Llorona before, and mind blown by the fact that she appeared in my dream. So now I know who visited me in my dream, but I still don't know why. So this is one of the many stories my mother has passed down to my siblings and I when we were very young. I was about 9 or 10 years old, and all of these stories took place in Central America, El Salvador to be precise. One day my grandma was supposed to meet up with her friend to go to another friend's wake. They were supposed to stay awake all night, mourning at the wake with the deceased. My grandma was waiting for her friend at their agreed upon meeting place, which happened to be near a small river around my area. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, my grandma sees this woman appear from far, dressed all in white. My grandma says that the woman bared a strong resemblance to her friend, so she started following her, calling out for her name, convinced it was her, and that she simply missed or passed by her. My grandma followed her along the river and kept calling out for her. However, the woman did not respond even once. Complete silence. All you could hear is the river flowing. The whole experience turned a lot more sinister when my grandma was finally able to catch up with this mysterious woman. My grandma described how the closer she got to the woman, the weirder her body began to feel. Her shoulders and head began to expand, and she felt as if she is stuck in place. Being almost an arm away from the woman, my grandma was able to finally, briefly see her face, or should I say, skull. The face was practically non-existent, only bones were visible. My grandma could not explain what she saw that night. All she remembers from that shocking and terrifying moment was the name La Llorona being screamed in her head by an unknown voice. This name, La Llorona, has been stuck in my grandma's head with no explanation until later years, where more cases of the mysterious spirit or ghost or whatever you call her appear to surface more and more. My dad was a freshman in high school during the time this story took place. It was football season and my dad was very active in sports. Back in the day, he said that they would have to walk from and to school and would use what they call the stinky tunnel to transport, as it eliminated the risk of crossing over the train tracks. The tunnel was approximately 50 yards long. A lot of homeless people and druggies would stay in the tunnel overnight in order to get some sort of warmth and get cover from the winter nights. One day, after school at football practice, my dad was getting ready for a big game, so the practice lasted very long. Everything ended at around 7 o'clock and he was finally able to head home. The walk back was approximately 400 feet. He got to the stinky tunnel, which he decided not to take, as he saw that homeless people and drug addicts has already taken over the tunnel for the night. My dad decided to cross the tracks instead, and said that as he was crossing the tracks, he heard a very loud crying noise, extremely emotional, as if something is very wrong. He did his best to see where the crying was coming from, however the darkness did its part, and my dad could not see anything. The far streetlights were barely illuminating the dirt around him. My dad decided to just walk away. However, as he was walking away, the crying followed him too. The faster he was walking, the louder the crying got, until it became unbearable to listen to and actually hurt his ears. The crying has suddenly stopped, and the hair on my dad's arm has stiffed when he heard La Llorona being whispered inside his own head. Terrified and shocked, he sprinted back home. As he was opening the door and about to go in, another word was heard inside his own head once again. This time, Hijo. My dad got inside and slammed the door as fast as he could, collapsing on the floor in tears. My grandmother ran to him to see what's wrong. He didn't say a word about what happened. He simply got up and went to his room. My dad never told this story to anyone and has simply shunned it out of his life, acting as if it never happened. Until recently, of course, when I got my ears on the story. And now, you do too.